All right, so hello again. So we're looking at, let's see, what is this again? 5.2, 5.3 out of the 20-2 workbook. So going through a couple of questions here, starting with number 1. We have this person who researched prices into 2 different brands of jeans at different stores. And we're given a table here of the different stores, the 2 brands of jeans, and their prices at each of the stores. And then, as you can see, we're asked to do some calculations here to fill in the chart. Let's see, what does it say? Complete the table to determine the standard deviation. And so with this question, they're actually basically just walking you through like the steps of how you can calculate this manually. So essentially what you're doing is, so you can see up here in the sheet of paper that I did, I basically kind of rewrote out the table, obviously not quite as nicely, but basically, actually, sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to make sure my mic is working. Okay, I just got scared for a second there that I was going to lose my mic. Okay, so basically what you need to do in order to do these calculations is exactly what it shows you here. Well, I guess it's a little bit tricky because the actual question here doesn't show you exactly where to start. But here you can see if we have all of these different prices, the first thing that it asks us below them is to find the sum of x. So these are our x values. And so basically what I went through here is I took these prices, these 4 prices, and added them up. So that's the sum of, this little symbol here always means to add things together, of these x values. So I got 183.46. And then the next thing it tells you to do is find the mean. So you can see that it's the x with that little bar on top. And all that means is that you're going to take, it's just the same as finding an average like you've done before in math. So basically you take that total value and divide it by the number of values that were in the data set. So in this case, there was prices from 4 different stores. So we're going to do 183.46 divided by 4, and that gives us the mean price of the jeans, which was $45.87. I did the same thing for B, and then so now we have our mean. The next thing we need to do, our mean for each set of jeans, sorry. The next thing we need to do is calculate the standard deviation, and we're given this formula where basically we need to find the sum of x, so each one of these individual values, minus the mean that we calculated here. And then we need to square that value. Okay, so in this table, they make it kind of nice and easy because they give you a column to calculate those values. So for example, for this first one, because it's x minus the mean, I'm going to go 45.99 in my calculator minus 45.87 here. Now, when I did these calculations, I made sure to use the full decimal. I just rounded here because when we're dealing with a price, we always have 2 decimals, but there's actually like an extended decimal behind there. So I did 45.99 minus 45.87, whatever the whole number was. And that's going to give you the most accurate number. So always make sure you're doing that using the full decimal. Okay, so then we have all of these values are calculated by taking the price minus this average. Okay, so then you go to the next one, do the same thing for all 4. And then once you have found all of those, then you'll notice that this equation is asking you for the sum of the x minus mean squared values. And so basically I just added all of these values together, and that gave me 1.1875. So that's basically the number I put in on top here. So it's going to be 1.1875. divided by n. N is the number of data sets you had. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 again. So we're going to divide these by, or the 1.1875 by 4. And that's going to give me 0.54486. So again, this extended decimal because I haven't rounded off. And so basically what that's telling me is that the standard deviation is 54 cents, right? So if I round it off, now I can round it because that's my final answer. And then I did the exact same thing for gene B. Now the next little part of the question is asking you which brand of jeans had the more consistent prices. So remember, standard deviation is saying like how different the prices can be from the average. And so because gene B has a difference of 62 cents and gene A is only a difference of 54, we can say that gene A had the more consistent pricing over the 4 stores. Okay, and then again, you would say because it has the lower standard deviation. So always remember, especially when you're in tests, because a lot of students forget this part, explain how you know. You'd have to mention that it's because it has the lower standard deviation. Okay. All right, question number 2. Candace is in a video game league. This game scores for her and 4 other team members are shown. So when you have a setup like this, where you're given like your data set and then the frequency, and those are the only 2 columns, then what you want to probably do is use technology. And keep in mind that being able to use your calculator to do these calculations is one of your learning outcomes. So you do have to have access to a graphing calculator. Remember, you can use the online one if you need to. And then when you come in for tests, you can always borrow one of the ones that we have here. You can always borrow those from the library. So essentially what you want to do, I'll walk you through how to do this in your calculator. Hold on a second here. I'm just going to see how I can shrink this down a little bit. I think that's about as good as it's going to get because I still want to keep that chart in there so we can see the numbers. Okay, so the steps for doing this in your calculator are, first of all, you want to go to this stat button. Okay, makes sense, we're in statistics. And then you want to go to edit. So that's the first thing that comes up. So that's good. So just hit enter. And then you're going to have L1 and L2. So L2 is where you're going to want to enter your frequency, and L1 is where you're going to want to enter your data point. So if you want to clear your list, you go up until L1 is highlighted and you just hit clear. Don't hit delete because then it'll delete the whole list and you don't want to do this. Clear will just delete out the values so that when you scroll down it's empty and you can start entering in your data. So for this one we do have to be careful because if you look right here, it says that these scores are the hundreds of thousands. So the other thing that you always want to do with this is you want to find the midpoint. So basically what this is telling us is we're looking at the frequency of scores that are between 1 times by 100,000 to 2 times by 100,000. So basically scores between 100,000 and 200,000. So we always want to use the midpoint, like basically the middle value in this range. So halfway between 100,000 and 200,000 is 150,000. So we're going to enter 150,000 as our first value there. Okay, next is we have 200,000 to 300,000, so halfway through is going to be 250,000. Next one is 300,000 to 400,000, so we're going to end up with 350,000 is going to be the halfway mark. Sorry, I keep losing my count of the zeros. And then we're going to have okay, sorry about that. I just had to get a little interruption there. Okay, so then we're going to carry on. So it's going to be 450, 1, 2, 3, 450,000, and then 550,000, and then 650, and 750, and the last one is 850. Okay, so now I have all of my values in, and then I can scroll right back up here, highlight list 2. This is where I'm going to want to enter my frequencies. So now I would go just the matching frequency. So the first one was 1, and then we had 4, and then we had 7, 12, 7, 12, 20, 25, 21, and 2. Okay, so now we have our complete list, and we're just being asked to solve for the mean and the standard deviation rounded to the nearest 1,000. So the next thing you want to do to find these calculations is, again, you're going to press stat. Okay, but this time instead of doing edit, because that's for your list, you want to go over to calc. So you're doing calculations and you just want to choose variable stats number 1 here. So hit enter. And then depending on, like for me, when I first put this in, it didn't have anything in there. It's just because I've been doing work that those are in. So if you find that you don't have your lists entered in, you'll need to do that. So the first one is your list of data points. So you want to make sure that matches up with L1, not L2, right? Because L2 was your frequency. So you need to make sure that that matches up there. So if you need to enter L1 here, basically all of your lists are here in blue. So that means you just have to hit second function and then you choose L1. Okay, and then if necessary, you can do the same for L2. Scroll down so calculate is highlighted and then you just hit enter. And now your calculator has actually done all the calculations for you. All you have to be able to do is pick out the data. Okay, so the X with the bar on top is the mean. And then that's the main one you're going to be concerned with, and the standard deviation has that sigma sign with it. So our mean is, let's see, they asked us to determine the mean and standard deviation rounded to the nearest 1,000. So for number 2, if we have a mean of 583,695. And then our standard deviation is, let's see, standard deviation is 150,562. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the decimals because we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. So rounding to the nearest 1,000, we're at 695. So we're going to be at 584,000 is the mean. And then for this one, because we're at 562, we're going to round that up to 151,000. Okay. Now, let me just have a look here because I did notice that the key, I did this both manually and using the calculator, and I got this same thing, this same answer both times. So I believe the answer key has an incorrect answer here because they said 635,870 points, and no matter what I did, I kept getting 584, and then the standard deviation was 151, which is what I also got. So I'm not sure why their mean was off for that one, but it looks like they have an incorrect answer there. So this is the proper way to do those calculations. And then the only other thing with this question, let me just see, it says to describe the performance of the players. So basically, you could just say kind of like, I mean, I guess there's like a bunch of different ways that you could say that. The main thing you would say is with a really large standard deviation like this, right? It's in the hundreds of thousands, even though the points are hundreds of thousands, but you know, the average is like close to 600,000 points, but there's a deviation, standard deviation of 151,000 from there, so up or down. So that's quite a bit of difference. Thanks, you too. That's quite a bit of difference. And so what we can say is that the skill of the players might be quite variable because the difference is so great. Okay, so that's number 2. And then number 5, let's have a look here. So number 5 was asking about Jarome Iginla's points for the Calgary Flames. And so you're given a bunch of seasons and his points, and you're asked to determine the mean and standard deviation of the points that he earned from 1997 to 2010. To 1 decimal point. So basically what I did for this one, now you could enter this into your calculator again. So basically you would just enter in the points as list 1. You would not have to put in a list 2 because there's not like a frequency calculation. So you would just go into your list. You would only enter the points under L1 and you would clear out L2. Oops, I just realized that box is kind of blocking it. So clear out list 2, enter in his points for L1, and then go into stat, calculate, same thing, and you should still get the same. If you want to be able to do this manually, basically what I did is in order to solve for the mean, you're going to add all the points together. So like 32, 51, 63, 71, you add all of those together, and then you divide it by the total number of points. So here you can see on my calculations, so you would count up, there's 13 rows here of data. So we're going to divide the sum of all those values by 13, which gives us an average of 73.5. And then once we've finished that, we can also do the standard deviation like manually. This is where it's probably more convenient to do it in the calculator because there was such a large list of data. It does end up being kind of a pain because basically what you have to do is go, like, you start with the first column here. And so in your calculator, again, because you'll want to use the full decimal that you got for your average, so basically what you have to keep doing is going back up and down in the list in your calculator. So you would start with the first value, 32 minus the average, and then the next value, 51 minus the average, 63 minus the average, 71 minus the average, 96, etc., all the way down the list. And then once you have all those values, you have to add them all together and then divide by the number of data sets, which was again 13, and that gives you a standard deviation of 18.25. So basically just remember when you're doing that math that I just pointed out, you're following this formula, which is in your textbook. I'm not sure if it's in the summary, but it's definitely in these practice problems. I'm not sure if they have it anywhere else in here. They do, yeah, so here, so this is on page 256 of your textbook. They give you the formula here. So basically it's the sum of each one of your data points minus your average that you've calculated, and then you square that value. Okay, and then so for each data point you're going to do that, and then at the end you'll add all those values together, and then you divide it by the number of data sets there were, and that will give you your standard deviation. Okay, so at the end I got that 18.25. And yeah, so that's pretty much what you're doing with question 5. Now with part B of that, it says determine the effect on the mean and standard deviation when the two lowest points are removed from the data set. So I didn't want to go through and do all this math all over again. So basically, but all you would do is the exact same math as I just did, but remove two lowest points from the data set. So you would go through and say, what's his lowest points? Looks like 32 and 51, so it looks like his first 2 seasons were the lowest points. So you just get rid of those 2. So now you're only going to have 11 data sets to work with. So remember, that means that you're only going to divide each of these by 11 as well. Okay, but you're going to do the exact same math. And then you can basically just say, like, how does that affect, like, does his standard deviation increase or decrease? Does his average should go up if you have the 2 lowest data sets gone. Okay, question number 7 was the next one. So you're given these tutoring services, monitoring the number of hours per month that a random sample of their clients spend studying. So with this one, I basically went through and did the exact same thing as I did in, let's see, what was that, question 2. I wanted to use my calculator to just do it quickly. So you're going to go into Stat, Edit, and go into your lists here, and then you would just, the main thing with this one is you have to remember that when you're entering your list, because this one doesn't do it for you, if you're using the data set side, remember you need to use the midpoint. So if one of the sets of values is from 0 to 4, what value is halfway between 0 and 4? It should be 2, right? And then, sorry, I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Okay, so yeah, so you would go 2, and then the next section here is from 4 to 8, so halfway between 4 and 8 is 6. If you're not sure, like, depending on how comfortable you are with, like, kind of basic math, if you're not sure how to calculate a midpoint, you can always use this. So you would say, what's the range, right? So we're going from 8 to 4, so go 8 minus 4, which gives you 4. Okay, so that is telling us how many numbers there are between those two values. We need to divide that in two because that's finding halfway, right? So that gives us 2. So this tells us that you need to go up 2 values from the lowest point to get there. So if we started our range at 4 and we go up 2 from there, then our midpoint is going to be 6. Okay, so I mean, for math like this, it's probably pretty easy, but some of your ranges might be a little more complex, so then it can be handy to know how to do that. Okay, sorry, so let's finish filling this in. So we have 2, 6, halfway between 8 and 12 is 10. Halfway between 12 and 16 is 14, and halfway between 16 and 20 is 18. Okay, so that's my data set. So always finding the midpoint for those. And then for frequency, we can just enter the values. So it's 5, 10, 25, 30, and 40. Those are our lists, and then we want to go in and do calculations. So calculate 1. Again, make sure you have your frequency list set to L2, and then we have L1, and then we just want to calculate. And so now we're given our mean is 13 point, they asked us to round to 1 decimal, so if it's 27 repeating, we're going to say 13.3. And our standard deviation is going to be 4.6. Okay, so right down here, sorry, my screen's a little dirty. 4.6 is my standard deviation, rounded to 1 decimal. You can do the exact same thing for the elite education. They have more data points, but it doesn't matter. You just go back in, fill in your list. And the other thing you could do, like if you wanted to keep your original list and you wanted to like add on the elite education, if you go into stat edit, you can do list 3 and list 4, but then you just have to remember that when you go to stat calculate, you're going to have to change this to L3 and L4, and then you have both lists side by side. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, that's how you determine the mean and the standard deviation, and then it'll just ask you like a comprehension question like which service is more successful at encouraging its clients to study more consistently. So you know that if they have a lower standard deviation and a higher average number of hours studied, so the higher the average is, this value, oh, sorry guys, this thing keeps getting in the way. So the higher your average is and the lower your standard deviation is, the more consistently people are studying a higher number of hours. Okay. All right, last question was number 10. Let's have a look here. Tammy works as a waitress. She records the amount of tips. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so basically you're given this list of values. That's the recordings of her tips. And first you want to determine the mean and standard deviation for the amount of tips to the nearest dollar. So again, what you could do here, actually, I don't think I'm going to worry about, because I think the question was only about B. So with this one, like you can calculate this mean and standard deviation either using your calculator or going through and calculating the data. I'm okay with either one, but then it says group data into reasonable intervals to determine the means and standard deviation of the group data to the nearest dollar. So basically what what I did is, because they only had 2 parts here, I wasn't sure if they only wanted us to have 2 groupings. And so essentially when I looked at the data, I just said, okay, well, the lowest number is 20, the highest number is 60, and then, or sorry, the lowest number is 15. There we go. And the highest number is 60. So, and then if I wanted an approximately equal number of data points in each group, then if I did, it would work out if I did 15 to 35, and then I mean there is no other 35, so technically you could call this 35 to 60, but I did 36 to 60 because 35 is included in this one. So then basically what I did is I went through this list and just like wrote them down in order. So like cross them off as you go, write them down in ascending order, and that way you can kind of keep track of how you want to put them into groups. So now I found that I had 15 to 35 and there were 10 data points in that section. So if, oh, this is in the way again. There we go. Okay, so 15 to 35, I have 10 data points in there. And then, like it shows you in the chart here, eek, I have to keep moving this thing around. It's kind of a pain. Like it shows you in here. So the frequency is how many data points you have in the group, right? So we had 10 in each group. And then the midpoint of the interval is, if you go from 15 to 35, what's the number that's halfway in between? So again, if you're comfortable with just figuring that out pretty easily, then that's good. But if you need the math, you take the higher number, subtract the lower number, and that tells you the difference between those two. Remember, you need to find the halfway point, so then you need to divide that difference in half, which tells us that we need to go up 10 from whatever our starting point was. So if we started at 15, we need to add 10, and that tells us that 25 is halfway between 15 and 35. Okay? And then I did the same thing for 36 to 60, so halfway between those two is 48. And so then basically you can go ahead and do your calculations, because like it says, the next thing you would do is f times by x. So basically it'd be the frequency, which was that there was 10 data points in here, times by the value we calculated here for x, the midpoint. So 10 times by 25 is going to give us 250. And then 10 times by 48 is going to give us 480. And then if we add that together, we're going to get 680, 730. That's weird. I thought I got a different value last time. Let me just have a quick look here. Yeah, no. Okay, so I do get 730 there. So depending on your groupings, you're going to get different values here, because then we have 20, and in order to solve for the total, we can then use those in our calculation. So you're going to find a little bit of a difference. But the main point of this question was just finding the midpoint. So hopefully that is clear now. So yeah, hopefully that all helped, and I will see you next time.